If you're just joining us, we are wrapping up a discussion with the University of Johannesburg's Senior Research Fellow for Africa, Diplomacy and Leadership, Dr. Oscar van Heerden. The conversation, it's all about the debate between the two presidential candidates, the Republican Party candidate and the Democratic Party candidate. It's all for the race to the White House in November. Dr. van Heerden, I want us to listen to Donald Trump, particularly on the question of Israel. He has had some very, very interesting things to say, and I'd like for you to pick up after him. Let's take a listen to this.
She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone.
Dr. van Heerden, what do you make of those comments?
Look, I mean, what we know about Donald Trump is that he makes these outlandish statements. I think it's a little bit far-fetched to say that Kamala Harris hates Israel and hates Arabs. I don't think that's necessarily the case. What I do know is that obviously as a presidential candidate, whether it's Kamala Harris or anyone else for that matter, they'll have to tread lightly when it comes to the issue of the tension and the war in the Middle East between Israel and Gaza, or Israel and Hamas. And the truth is that I don't think that there's going to be any policy shift. Remember, as we all know, Kamala Harris was the vice president and is the vice president of Joe Biden. The Biden administration has been unequivocal in their support for Israel and the genocide that is being committed in Gaza. And I don't think there's going to be a policy shift there necessarily. Yeah. I think what Kamala Harris is going to do, like most Democratic presidents in the past, is try to find some solution, lasting solution, but it is going to come to naught if you are not prepared to engage with Israel in a manner that says you cannot continue to violate international humanitarian law, you cannot continue to kill indiscriminately innocent civilians, and so on and so forth. You cannot continue with the illegal settlements in Gaza and in the West Bank and so forth. And if you are not prepared to do that, you are not going to be an honest broker. So I think it's going to yet again be a failed project on the part of Kamala Harris. On the part of Donald Trump, remember, this is the only American president that decided to take the American embassy from Tel Aviv to East Jerusalem. And by doing so, was flagrantly saying to the entire world and to the Palestinians, we believe that East Jerusalem belongs to Israel. And I think that is a very, very dangerous message. He's not an honest broker. And I think that if Trump comes in, the fate of the Palestinians is going to continue to be in peril.
Just based on those words, those last few words about the fate of the people of Palestine, because I'm not so sure we can talk about a Palestinian state because it is what they are fighting for. You saw the developments at the United Nations General Assembly, where at least there is some form of representation of Palestine finally. But let's talk about what this will do for Benjamin Netanyahu if a Trump presidency were to come back. Do you think that would embolden him? And what is happening in his country right now? Because there are major protests there, people very unhappy, particularly about the hostages that some of whom have been killed in the tunnels in Gaza.
I think that Trump is giving us a bit of a taster. I think Trump genuinely believes that on the current trajectory, Israel might cease to exist as we know it. It's on a destructive path. It might think that it is winning against the Hamas and the the people of Palestine, but actually in the global sense, it is losing. It's losing its legitimacy. It is increasingly being seen as a pariah state. And we've seen the preliminary pronouncements of the ICJ court, the World Court, with regards to apartheid, Israel, as well as the settlements being illegal, and so on and so forth. So I think Trump is going to play the game that is going to put sufficient pressure on Netanyahu to potentially end the war, not because he's wanting to do a favor to the Palestinians, but because he fears that on the current trajectory, Israel will become weaker and weaker, and it might actually mean or spell the end of the Israeli state as we know it. And for that reason, I think to protect Israel, he's going to put pressure on Netanyahu to stop the war and to actually begin to talk of how do we find a lasting solution. And I don't think, I've always been one of those, Collie, that has said the two-state solution is no longer viable. Former President Mbeki has made the point a few weeks ago. I've said it for years. It is just not viable. A completely new imagination will have to apply to find solutions in that part of the world, like we did here in South Africa.
Yeah. Finally, Dr. van Heerden, the Ukraine-Russia conflict, what do you think is going to be the fate of those two nations now for either of these two?
I think if Kamala Harris wins, which I don't think she will, but if she does win, we'll see more of the same in terms of unequivocal support to Ukraine with her European partners to try and find a solution for the Ukrainian war by putting pressure on Putin and on Russia. If Trump wins, Trump has got a much better relationship with Putin. He's going to want to put pressure on Zelensky to say the war must stop. And he's going to try and come out of the negotiations as an honest broker that potentially is going to give some territory back to Ukraine, but not all. I think that is the best that the Ukrainians can hope for if there is a Trump presidency.
Yeah. Very briefly then, Dr. van Heerden, recently a news report came out linking the family of Kamala Harris to the slave trade. I wonder where that might put her and her presidency if she were to win, particularly as regards the continent of Africa. And please also add to whether we might be the not so dark continent if Trump were to come back. I mean, he had some very unsavory things to say about this continent.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's absolute nonsense. I don't think we need to put too much to the issue of who had links with the transatlantic slave trade. I don't think it has any bearing in the presidential election. It is as ominous as the time when they tried to make a big deal about Obama's heritage and is he actually American? You know, why did he come via Hawaii, et cetera, et cetera. I think these are petty politics. It is the kind of politics that Trump and his supporters obviously want to make a big deal of. I think it is absolutely of no consequence whatsoever. And I don't believe that there's any truth necessarily in links with the transatlantic slave trade and Kamala Harris and her family. It is just a very low blow in terms of big politics in the United States.
Dr. Oscar van Heerden, thank you very much for your time. He is a senior research fellow for Africa diplomacy and leadership at the University of Johannesburg.